Think we're good. All right. Alex Baker, aka Awesemo, aka the number one DFS player in the world? Do we say world? I know technically country, but do we say world at this point? Are we the only one? What's going on, man?
What's up, man? It's hard to know. I haven't been following like the Korean DFS rankings or anything else, so maybe just stick with country.
We'll do country for now. For now, though, right? I mean, there's
That's
no
right.
limitations, though. I know. I mentioned to you. I heard you do an interview. I don't know if it was a year or two ago, but I remember you kind of like even with you starting Awesemo.com and everything like that. It sounds like you're somebody who appreciates a good challenge and appreciates the right like I don't know. That's the vibe I get.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean that's what this is all about. It's like who can like know the most about a sport and put together the best team. So the end of the day, that's what it's all about is like having the most sports knowledge of anyone on these tournaments.
Yeah, I find like for me personally, like someone who grew up like I'm like you, a sports fan and all that stuff growing up, and then playing sports and like I was a kid. I had like dreams of like going to like everybody going to play Major League Baseball and all these kind of things. And I find that playing DFS or even just gambling on sports, my appeal to it has been more than just the money. It's been more about the competition. It's about more about feeling like what's the next best thing to playing the sport is like knowing the sport and feeling like you're an expert at the sport, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like what sports fandom's always been about. I mean, it's like you can follow your favorite team, and the way you kind of communicate that is by knowing a lot about it. Like how many points per game did Christian Wood have this season for the Pistons, or like knowing all these sports facts and DFS and fantasy sports is just a logical extension where it's like you think you know what's going on, and let's see you put it to the test.
100%, man. Put the money where the mouth is. Go old school on them.
That's right.
So let me ask you, man. Obviously, we've had the quarantine, we've had the shutdown. I know for you, you're someone who's been relying on on playing daily fantasy sports for a little while now, for quite a while now. What kinds of things are you doing? Obviously, I know that you've been active playing esports, you've been playing KBO, all these kind of things to keep busy. But what kind of things are you doing during the quarantine to kind of fill out your day?
Yeah, I mean, I was spending a ton of time doing DFS before the quarantine on my computer, and now I'm spending probably even more time doing DFS because, like, with esports, I mean, that's like four different new games that we all have to learn. And it's been a grind to try to get them all down. And now we have Korean baseball, as you mentioned, the little icing on the cake. And I know you've been posting a lot about the Korean baseball recently. So what have you thought so far?
Man, I mean, personally, it's like it's similar to me to the XFL, where like the competition level isn't obviously as crisp, but like it's passable, especially at a time when we don't have anything. Like when you don't have football. Like personally, I like playing the XFL because I like the NFL. So without the NFL, it's nice to have football, And it's the same thing with Korean baseball, man. It's not the same, but I mean, shit, it's close. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think like I was amazed how much enthusiasm there is for Korean baseball. I know a lot of people they didn't really gravitate towards esports, being sports fans, so kind of appeals to a different group of people. And glad that we have some sports back, and hopefully the first of many leagues that will start playing again.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And to be honest, I had a lot of fun playing. I played some of the CSGO. But the League of Legends was really where I was just starting to find. I didn't bother to look at the schedule. I just dove into it head first and just made projections, all these things, and I'm like ready to rock. And then like I didn't realize it was like by the time I finished everything, it was like a week and a half left of the tournament, and so it was like after that it was all like 2 games late and shit. But that game, I to me it made the most sense from a DFS standpoint, similar to NHL, MLB. Like the stack is crucial. Like it made sense to me, so I thought it would have picked up a little bit more. I caught a ton of shit on Twitter when I was posting about esports. People like, dude, you're a degenerate. What are you doing? Like you're crazy. You know what I'm saying? But of the esports that you've been playing, I know you're playing all of them. Which would you say would be your favorite?
I have to agree with you. League of Legends, man. Like, there's something to League of Legends that's just unique from all the other sports where, Like, first of all, they're playing these best of three, best of five game series, so it's not just all about one game. Like, the game will have like different amounts of fantasy scoring. So it's like, do you want the game stack? Do you want the team stack? There's just a lot of different things going on that make it really interesting to build a fantasy team for.
Yeah, man. I think if you like, obviously esports, the end is I always found it funny at Wise Take. I always tried to have someone covering esports, even with nobody watching it. Nobody was watching it because it's a sport that you know, you have to really sell somebody on. Like, you have to like almost fund them to try it. They're so anti, like, no man, I don't get this, and I understand that it's not a traditional sport. But like, the industry of esports is so massive. I just like, it was surprising to me that it took an epidemic for people. I mean, a pandemic for people to actually start playing it. Like, I'm a little surprised. I'm a little taken back. And like, and listen, I was hesitant too. But like, obviously, playing baseball, football, basketball, there's always overlap. There's always something going on. You almost don't have time to take on new sports. So that was always kind of my excuse, I guess. But I'm a little surprised. What do you think it is that people are like a little hesitant to kind of latch on to esports, even now when we don't really have sports?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like some people aren't gamers, and it's hard to imagine really loving League of Legends unless you are a video game fan. So, from what I kind of have been finding out, maybe about half the people are. So,
Yeah.
I think that like it's hard to connect to for certain people, but the ones who have played, I've heard great things about the experience. So hopefully, for some big tournaments, like, dude, imagine playing DFS for the world's esports competition. That'd be sick.
Oh, dude. Oh, and matter of fact, I think that's the one thing that was kind of, to me, looking at League of Legends from like a, I don't know, from an overview. The one thing holding it back was the amount of ties. Now, they added the captain slots, obviously, try to counteract that, but there's a ton of ties, especially when the favorites win. Imagine having more teams. Imagine having an 8-game or 10-game slate. You could really have some fun, dude. And there's a lot of scoring. I never played the video games. I'm actually, like, I played Madden and all that kind of shit. But I'm one of those like weird dudes that, like, if I watch like first person shooter games, I get nauseous. Like, if I watch somebody playing it, I'll literally get sick. You know what I'm saying? But like, I don't. But to me, I just love the competitiveness of DFS. Like, they're still competing, and if they're competing, I'm still interested. So it was like, you know, like, I don't need to. I understood it just by kind of going through. I remember being a kid, and like the first time I saw something, not even a kid. I think I was watching like my nephew, and he's watching other kids play video games, and this is before Twitch was just starting to blow up. And I remember thinking, like, what kind of loser like watches other kids play video games? And then, you know, fast forward the clock. What kind of loser is betting on kids playing video games? You know, and that's this guy right here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because like so many people watch sports and they don't complain that they're not like playing basketball instead of watching it, you know? So it's like,
Yeah.
it's really the same thing where, I mean, like so many people watch football, but I've never donned any shoulder pads in my life. So,
Oh, no, I completely understand it. I completely get it. Let's get into before DFS, man. Tell me a little bit about beforehand. What were you doing right before you kind of got in? If you weren't playing DFS, what would you be doing for a living?
yeah, I was playing poker professionally. I tried for a couple of years after college get into the nonprofit scene. I was doing some fundraising for an environmental cause, and I was like, I wasn't even that good at it, so I got released from
Oh
the
shit.
organization. Yeah, and I was like, well, I played poker before and made some money, so maybe I'll just become a poker pro instead. And I started off pretty small, you know, like making enough money to get by, but not really having a ton of success. But then kind of started grinding more and more, and I got to kind of like a mid level where I was playing like the mid stakes. And then I heard that DFS was the new big game people were playing, and I'm like, that's great because I can play that in the U.S. You know, it's legal. So I was like, maybe I should try this out.
Dude, it's hilarious because like I was like, I don't want to say really big, but a lot of my time was invested in the sports betting world before everything was legal. So before DFS, so I spent time building up reputations on different forums and like blogs and having all these group chats. I was always interested in, and again, it was the competition, wanting to be right about feeling like you know sports. So I actually got into DFS for the same reason. It was legal. Right? Like, oh wait, I can do this without having to go through these offshore books and you know, deal with these shady ass dudes on the street or whatever. I was like, let me just veer into that. And it's funny Because like when you think about like when people always say like these things, people are doing these things regardless. They're finding ways to do what they want to do, and by you making things illegal, you're just forcing them to do a black market instead of capitalizing on an opportunity to take that money and recycle it into the American economy. And I think the gambling is a great example, right? I mean, even you were playing poker, doing something that at the time was technically illegal to, you couldn't report that you were making that kind of money or really have a conversation with anybody. And then they found a way for you to come in. So now instead of these offshore places getting your money, getting your action, it's American companies doing it. So like, it just kind of goes to say it's interesting to me. How long did you play poker?
I was a pro for about 5 years. I mean, I got into it in 2004, like when there was a big boom.
Right.
And then I was too young to really understand like how to best take advantage of the opportunity. So I was lucky that by the time DFS came around, I was a little bit older and wiser. But yeah, it's crazy how the government like legislation like has such an impact over like your life and like how it's going to go if you're into sports betting, DFS or poker. And we've been seeing that recently because in New York, I see you got the New York hat on. It's like a lot of people in New York are frustrated right now because they can't play Korean baseball. They can't play Counter-Strike. Like there's some like unique regulations in New York, and it's like kind of you're at the mercy of whatever the local government is.
100%, man. Even there was like the big Yahoo craze. My boy Paulie's down in Florida. So everybody's trying to. Yahoo was giving away free money basically with the free rake and all that stuff, and the Florida people couldn't take advantage. It's just they could play FanDuel, they could play DraftKings, they just couldn't play Yahoo. It's just and you're right. And even like it's funny because you think about sports and like to me going into the sports industry was always appealing, not just because I love sports, but also for the industry. People are always gonna want sports. There's always gonna be sports. That's my mentality. So you give everything up and go after in the sports. This is the last fucking thing in the world that you expect to happen. And you're just like, holy shit, I got no sports. But at the same time, as you being a business owner, I think you would appreciate this as well. I think there's something to looking at these sports that all of us are, like the esports stuff especially, and realizing that what just happened can definitely happen again and is probably going to happen more often. So it's interesting that a sport like League of Legends, Call of Duty, whatever, like they're able to continue going. They can pretty much go without skipping a beat because they're doing everything virtually anyway. So I don't know, like to you, do you see that as like something where it's like I think like it makes sense for people to kind of shift towards those sports at some point? I'm not knocking the traditional sports. I love baseball, football. I love those sports. I grew up playing them, watching them, everything. But I also am looking at this from a business perspective of this is the one thing that seems like it's fairly safe and it's only going to grow from here. It's grown so quickly and it's going to continue to grow at some point. It's just a matter of like right now, if you invest all the time and resources to that and the demand's not quite there when everything comes back, it just may not be ready. And so like what is your approach with the whole esports? I mean, I'm sure that's something you've thought of. Everything went down. Now you take all your guys, your whole staff, you're all doing esports and venturing into different kind of, I know you even have a blog section now where like, you guys are keeping active and you have to do it. That's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm here talking to you, just trying to keep active, make connections and get to know people across the industry. So, I mean, I threw a lot at you. Pick one.
Yeah, I mean, esports, it was, first of all, it was kind of a gut-wrenching moment when like all the sports came to a stop and I was like, man, like DFS is going to be over for the foreseeable future. But like even the esports leagues were canceled for like a brief period of time. And I was like, oh man, this is rough. Like we didn't expect this would ever happen, like you're saying, because sports are so popular. Esports for me, it was just kind of a way we could make some money to keep everyone kind of afloat, like at the company. And I'm not really expecting that it will continue to be as popular in the future, but this was a gigantic opportunity for them to showcase the product. And I think League of Legends, I've seen people on Twitter posting about how much like they've fallen in love with League of Legends. It has like different timing than other sports, so it'll lock at like midnight, which is good because like after NBA, you could enter some League of Legends lineups and stuff. So I think there's a potential for it to take off and be kind of another major event in the DFS ecosystem. But I'm curious to hear what you think is going to be the future of esports DFS.
I mean, I feel the same way as you. I think it'll be in a better place than it was. I think people will continue to play it, but at the end of the day, people are going to follow the money. And it's funny because the money's going to, money follows money. And like, I know that sounds weird, but right. people are only going to play it if the contests have money that they want. DraftKings is only going to give them the money if they want, if they're willing to put their money up in the first place. So it's kind of hard to gauge. Like, I would imagine that FanDuel and DraftKings, like, say NBA and MLB were starting next week, I would imagine we would see a scale back in those contests. And if there's a scale back in those contests, like, that would be what would take someone like me who can't wait for the next 5-game League of Legends slate. That's what would make me not play it. Right now, if all the sports came back and the contest stayed pretty much the same, I'd still play it. I enjoyed it. I think there's an edge there. I understand it, and I think we can make money doing it. But if they take the money away and all the money's back in baseball and basketball, we like you, we have to go where the money is. We kind of have no choice. So this is a situation where we're almost at the mercy. And like, yeah, we can still play, but what are you going to invest all these hours for if the top prize you can win that night is only like $5,000? It's just like, it puts you in a weird place. You know what I mean? But I mean, I definitely like, I definitely can appreciate. I mean, I definitely like, I definitely.
Here, I'm having some technical difficulties.
It's all good.
All right, I think. Wait, can you not? Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. Yeah. So I agree. It's like, you gotta follow the money. It's like, if it's between League of Legends on Sunday and NFL, it's like League of Legends is gonna get absolutely crushed, and that is when a lot of League of Legends contests are. But if it can find its own niche, I think maybe there'll be some interest. It'll be still fun to play. So.
Dude, going back to the XFL though, like, how bad do you feel for those guys, right? Like, they came out, they started the first time, wasn't gonna work because gambling was illegal. So who gives a shit? Nobody cares. Like, people don't, a lot of people don't want to watch games. They don't have any vested interest in it. It's the truth. They'll watch their own team and that's it. Then they get this wave, gambling's legal. They embraced it. They were talking about lines during the games. It was doing well. I was enjoying playing it. The content there was a demand for it. DraftKings had contests. And then, like, the one fucking thing that could stop them, seriously, right? Like, the one thing that could stop them. But I will say this, like, it provides hope for anybody else out there trying to have a league. Like, those little, I don't know about, like, the league, like the big three, that basketball league. Maybe it's too small. But any of those ancillary leagues, I think they realize there's an opportunity now. Like, they'll never be the MLB. They'll never be another NBA or MLB. But these smaller leagues now realize that if I do it at a time where I'm not competing with them, there's a market for people who still want this product and are willing to gamble it. Do you think we'll see like some other leagues starting to emerge? I mean, obviously it's going to take some money to get behind it, but are you interested in investing in a league, Alex? Can you?
I don't know about investing, but I'll definitely play DFS for some new leagues. And if they had Big Three DFS, I'd be all over it. I mean, I love the idea that I could roster my favorite basketball players from 20 years ago. So it's like maybe like I'll have Mike Bibby hitting 4-pointers and stuff. Like, what would be better than that, right?
Oh yeah. You'll definitely have a biased projection for the players you like, right? Like, no, he gets an extra 10 points just because he's cool as shit. Like, just because he's awesome.
Dude, Big Three has some great storylines too. Like, they had this team had Chauncey Billups, Steven Jackson, and Ron Artest. I'm like, this is the Malice at the Palace, like, reunion team.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. It's funny how they bring that stuff up, and like Steven Jackson has like his own podcast on Showtime and shit now, and like, and all these kind of things, and they talk about it, and like, don't get me wrong, like he shows remorse. He always talks about how it was a mistake, and but if you were, who would have known they'd like you thought that was gonna ruin everybody's career when that happened? Like the way they made it a big deal, like you thought everybody was done. Like those guys are never gonna play again. You went out and punching fans. Like shit is crazy. It was just fucking nuts, man. The whole situation was nuts.
I mean, dude, that was a seminal moment in sports. I mean, I remember where I was when like the Malice at the Palace happened. And it was crazy because. Well, yeah, it's like Ron Artest got suspended for the season, but like the fans involved, like also got all these like criminal charges and stuff. Like,
it was.
I definitely didn't see it playing out that way.
It was wild, man, and like we're talking like we see fights in the NBA all the time, and guys barely connect. People make a big deal about it. How many times do you see a guy throw a punch and he barely nips him? These guys were connected, full force, like running head start, everything, man, just bam. That was like one of those things. You're always in the back of your mind, like, oh yeah, fight. I remember being a Knicks fan growing up, and the Knicks always got into fights, man. Like Chris Childs and all these guys, man, they always got into fights. So you always kind of root for it, and it was never brutal. Like Jeff Van Gundy hanging on the shoe of Alonzo Mourning. Oh, that was all fun and games. That fight had me like, oh shit, that can't happen. Even I was like, oh damn, that was too much, man. You can't be overboard, man. So
they broke the fourth wall, like, and it's like now when you're a fan at a game, it's like you gotta stay in line, or else you could get attacked by some like superhuman.
He's some superhuman, yeah, exactly. Not even a normal human being, but a person that is like abnormally big for the the average citizen. That's awesome. So. Okay, so let me take it back. So you're in the poker world for a little bit. Before you got into poker, if you weren't into the gambling scene, what were your interests? Like, what you mentioned, you went to college. What did you go to school for?
Yeah, I did the math and economics. I guess like the thing in my past that really ties into the daily fantasy is I did a lot of academic competitions, like math competitions in particular, and like kind of learned that maybe I could compete with the best of them. I didn't like so like I kind of transferred my experience competing in those. I'm like, poker is kind of like that, and then daily fantasy was even more like that, where it's like if you know the math of everything, that gives you a big advantage.
Oh yeah, dude, that's a huge edge. And even when I first came into this industry, it's like, when on TV, the way they would advertise the DraftKings commercials, they would show some guy saying, "Oh yeah, I won 50 grand playing DraftKings," and it was like some dude that looked like he still plays in the NFL. Like it was some guy that looks like he's currently an active player. And when I got into the industry and I started seeing the people who were actually playing it, I was like, okay, this is not some like guy on his couch that was just fucking sitting around. Like a lot of these guys came from the poker world. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of these guys came from the poker world, I'm noticing, which obviously they have an edge. They understand gambling. They understand probabilities, odds. And then you factor in the mathematics when I discovered, okay, so they're not just playing one or two teams. These guys are playing 150 teams, just for one contest. And then you start getting in, okay, so I understand there's something bigger to this. So I think like the statistics background now, I know that a lot of people, and I know one of the things that you tried to gear your site towards is you don't believe like the way you play to be successful isn't necessarily how everybody has to play to be successful. I know you've kind of like pushed out this whole like we provide different options and you kind of just roll with whatever fits. And we're kind of here to support, and that's always been our approach as well, man. The same exact thing, because I don't think there's a one size fit all. If I try to be Awesemo, I don't have Awesemo's brain. I don't have his experiences. I don't have what he's been through. I don't have that. So I'm not going to look at things the same exact way he does, and you have to kind of find your own way to be successful. What do you think would be like some of the, I guess from an advice standpoint, just talking to the general person, they come to you, Awesemo, you're the number one player in the world. You know what I mean? I just want to have your life. Like if somebody, like what would you tell them? You know what I mean? Aside from like get back and like, don't DM me anymore or something like that.
I think the one common thread between all DFS players is everyone feels like they know a little bit more than like everyone else. And it's important to kind of realize like the extent of your knowledge and kind of figure out, well, this is what we don't know, and like maybe I can learn more about that and find an edge, because if you just copy what other people are doing, I mean, you're going to be capped as far as how high you can reach.
No, I think that's really good advice. It kind of follows the whole mantra. One thing I've noticed is like since I got into the industry, the thing you hear about the most is being contrarian. That's what you hear about that the most. That's everybody's favorite thing. First of all, nobody comes in this to be a cash game player. People turn into cash game players because they were good at it or because they were comfortable with that kind of risk, whatever. But nobody looks in DraftKings and it's like, I can make $50 if I risk $50. This is fucking amazing. Nobody came here for that, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, so if they came here because they're looking at I want to risk $8 and I want to win 100 grand. That's why that they're here. So like, I guess like from that perspective, if you're just like I don't know, how do you temper people's expectations when they first kind of get into the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the funny thing is you mentioned like everyone wants to turn $8 into 100K, and I think those are the contests that you can really do well in, because there are so many people that are drawn into that notion. And cash games are significantly harder to make money at because there aren't as many people that really believe in the concept. So it's all about like the contrarian thing is kind of a trope, like you're mentioning, where it's like everyone wants to be contrarian, but like what does that mean exactly, you know? And like there's this whole marketing angle in DFS is like I'm going to find the sleeper that no one else has, and the reality is like it's not that easy to do. Like there might be a few people that have such an extensive knowledge of the sport that they can look in and pick out players better than anyone else, like make lineups that are stronger than anyone else, just because they have that knowledge and can avoid like the pitfalls other people are making. But like not many people can do that, and you don't have to like strive to do that. It's much easier to kind of outsmart people as a poker game than trying to really dig into the sport.
You know, I think that's a really good perspective. I think that like game theory, I think is obviously extremely important. I've seen some players that are just super good at tournaments, and whether people want to call it luck or whatever the case is, to me, it's the game theory. They're just reading the field right. They're just putting, you know, if everybody's this way, I'm going that way. And it sounds easy, but it's obviously not, because when you explain it to people, like I find like some of our members, people who just got into DFS will be a member of our site, or, you know, they'll be in our YouTube chat or whatever. And like they'll send a picture of a lineup. I'm sure you get that all the time. Like you know, fucking people take a look at my lineup and all this kind of stuff. And you look at it and you're looking at like, okay, so literally every player is like is like a 1% player, and you're sitting here like, well, you know, there's a difference between being contrarian and just picking bad plays for the sake of ownership, right? Like there's a difference, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't know, man. Like, can you explain that like better? Like I feel like I can explain it. It makes sense to me, but I understand what it is. Do you have a better way of wording that to people? Like, what's the difference between when you get contrarian? How do you get contrarian? Are you mixing it in with the chalk? Are you looking? Obviously, it depends on the sport. A sport like basketball, where you're not concerned about stacking, is different than a sport where you're looking for a low owned stack. But what's your best, I guess, like take on that?
Yeah, I think that is a really good point, and it's like I always start off with the assumption that the field is going to be pretty smart and they're going to have the best plays. So when you approach it with that kind of assumption, like the conclusions you're going to reach are a lot different. And I think that like I find it like you want to like I find that hand building actually like gives people a big advantage that they don't take advantage of enough, where it's like you can create this narrative where it's like, well, everyone is stacking the Patriots, so I'm going to take the other stack on the other side and outsmart the field in that way. And like that kind of logic is actually like pretty effective, because the best lineups have like a logical explanation for like why you're making the choices. But the problem is like it's tough enough to do once, because you got to really think about the lineup. But then trying to do it 20, 150 times, that becomes like a Herculean task for people. So it's all about kind of like building a really strong strategy for one lineup, and then it's like, how do I do that 20 times?
That's why. So I know, obviously, I know you use fantasy crunchers, optimizers. You're big on projections, and you know, you just mentioned you're a big math guy. So how many? I guess like on a percentage basis, I know that for you, someone like you tries to join like pretty much every kind of action they can get when they decide to attack a slate, or a sport, I should say, because I know you're even big on attacking multiple slates within that sport, right? That's a whole other thing we can get into. I know, like if you're doing NBA, it's not just a 7 p.m. lock, the main slate. You're also in the 8 p.m. express, and you're kind of going all the way through. I would assume that there's a math to that as well, and how you approach it, because you're not just like doing the same exact teams that you had in the 7 and the 8, right? Like I'm assuming, okay, I had XY ownership of this team here, so let me take the other team in this slate. Like, is it a lot of that going on there too?
I mean, to be honest, like I think that like my strategy in the 8 p.m. games and the 10 p.m. games usually like stinks. Like I'm not trying hard at those at all. I like phone those in super hard, and it's funny because people look at my lineups and they're like, what does this mean? You know, like why are you doing this?
What does
I'm
this
like,
mean?
dude, because I'm lazy. I'm lazy. I don't want to spend all night on my computer like building lineups for every slate. So it's like those niche slates are really the ones where you can get a huge edge by just trying harder than other people. Because I think a lot of people like me, they're just not trying that hard to make the best lineups they possibly can for an express slate.
So what you're saying is the people, if they jump in on the express slate, they may be able to take advantage of some Awesemo fish lineups. There may be some Awesemo fish
Sorry,
lineups in there, and they can just hop in there and feast. Okay, I like that. Give it. That's called giving back, Alex. That's called giving back. That's what that's called, bro. It's so funny, man. You're telling the story about how you were in the beginning. You're working for nonprofits, and they said you weren't good enough. Like, you're trying to help people, man. Like, what is that? What do you mean you're not good enough? You're out there trying to help people for good, and they're telling you like, no, it's not good enough. Like, that's wild, man. I mean, shit.
Well,
No, go ahead.
the nice thing about DFS is no one can fire you. I mean,
Yeah, true.
that job was a lot harder than this one because it's like they had quotas for like how much money you had to raise.
Oh,
And
dude.
DFS is like, if they had that, like no one would be a pro because like you're gonna have to lose before you can win.
Oh yeah. And again, that's probably one of the bigger things I've noticed is like people, aside from people being irresponsible with their bankrolls when they first start playing, is not having the patience. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're just like, they expect the results immediately, and I'm like, bro, you're competing against thousands of people that have been doing this for years, and you just fucking started. Like, give it a break. You know, like, if I was, like, you don't even have to play money. It's about grasping the concept. Like, but I guess that comes down to goals, right? What are you here to do? If you're here to if you're just here because you're like, no, I just heard I can make a quick $100,000, you're not going anywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, like, you're just, you might as well go buy a lotto ticket. It's the same fucking thing, and maybe you can win millions instead of 100K, right? But if you're coming in this seriously and you're like, no, I just really want to be good at this, whether it's because you want to make extra income or you're just like, no, I just love it and want to be good at it, it takes patience, man. I mean, like, how long did you play before you finally started to get it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, oh, my story might not be that indicative of the average person, but like the way I see it is, there's like 100,000 people that are all trying to like hit big, and some of them do, and that's how they get their career started in fantasy. But most don't, and they quit. For me, is like I approached it from the perspective of being a professional from the beginning because I heard like all these poker pros were quitting to play DFS, so I had a much different approach. And based on my experience in poker, I kind of had like more manageable expectations about, how to start off. I actually started in cash games, tried to just build a better model than other people, which was more feasible back in 2015. But then kind of learned the tournaments as I went and built up from the ground up.
There you go. But again, like, you came in from a different perspective. You were already a professional in a different industry, but a similar industry where you have bankroll. And like you said, that's a big, especially even now doing a lot of these interviews, I find that a lot of these people that started like Roto Grinders and these other sites, they at one point or another had this hot streak where they just won a shit ton of money, and that kind of propelled them, man, because now they're playing in the contests they want to play in, or they're, although whatever, we've heard a bunch of different people say that, everybody's individual, whatever, but that's been a big theme, is people finding that hot streak, and that's either propelled them into getting a job in the industry to carry them over, or it's just giving them a bankroll to allow them to continue playing at a level where they can sustain those profits, or at least sustain profits that are feasible to live off of. So that I do think is interesting. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I want to go back to the hand-built thing, because I do think, obviously, a lot of people listening to this, I think most people that are out there listening, consuming content, are still building teams by hand. I'm sure a lot of them are starting to dabble at MME. You guys push it a lot. We push it a lot. I believe that's the way to play. If the number one player in the world is playing it, there's obviously got to be something to it, right? But for the people that are building hand-built teams because they don't have the resources, they don't have the time, or they just enjoy it, or whatever, and like you said, there is still definitely a market for it, certain contests. About what percentage of your teams built in a night are hand-built?
Yeah, so like the transition, I think, from hand building to MMB is like, instead of like choosing every single player like by hand, like you're generating a bunch of lineups and then you're choosing the lineups that you like. It's not like the process is that much different, because it's like you're still looking at your lineup and you're like, is this a lineup I like? If not, like I'll look at some swaps or like a different lineup. So like to me, like they shouldn't be that much different. I think the trouble people get into is when they're not putting a lot of thought into the lineups that they're putting in. Of course, like trying to enter 150 and give it a lot of thought, that's a tough task. But yeah, so I guess like the way I'd explain it is like you want to be able to look at a lineup and decide, like, does this lineup make sense? Is there an edge in this lineup that I'm like trying to outsmart people by doing this when everyone else is doing something else?
Again, there's like a common theme in all of it, and the whole zigzag approach, but obviously more on like a bigger, like a grander scheme, right? I've obviously, if we're looking into everybody's lineups, yours and a lot of other pros and top players out there, it's not like when you guys talk about being contrarian, but it's not like you don't play the chalk, right? It's about knowing, like, that's part of the skill is picking good chalk from the bad chalk and kind of getting that part right. It's the same thing like in the sports betting world. If you want to bet on a game with the spread, it's basically 50-50 minus the juice, right? If you want to win more than that, you got to do a parlay, and that means you got to get everything right. It's the same kind of concept here. It's like it's a parlay. The odds may be in your, you could win a shit ton of money if you get it right, but same concept, man. It's not just getting that 1%. You got to get everything right with it too. So like, what would be your advice in like approaching chalk?
Yeah, I think describing it as a parlay is a good comparison for people familiar with sports betting, where it's like you need to hit on every play basically to win a tournament. So like the way you could like estimate your chances is like, what is the chance that this guy will win times the chance that this guy will win, etc. So like thinking of a parlay is a good way to think of it, and it's like in that coming out from that perspective, it's like you want a bunch of safe odds on a bunch of guys, and then you want to take some risks on a couple guys, but not go overboard.
You know what? That actually makes perfect. It's the same thing. If you're doing a 10-team parlay, it's not like all plus 150s, right? Like you're working in like some minus 350s, guys that you couldn't afford to take by themselves, but you're gonna work them in because you get to. I think that actually, like on top, saying what I said and you kind of taking it to a level deeper, I think that kind of puts things into perspective a little bit for, like you said, people who at least are familiar with the sports betting world. Definitely interesting approach. So one thing I'll say, there's a lot of common misconceptions about MMA. Number one, people think that if they were doing the same thing, they would be winning all the time. That's number one, right? Well, if I had the time, I have a full-time job and I got 4 kids, and so, but if I had the time to, build 100 something 500 teams, I would be the number one player in the world. That's number one. The common I think number two is people that do get into it. They simply take somebody's projections, whether it be yours, they make their own, ours, wherever, Roto Grinders. They upload it, they do 150, and okay, now I should win. I did what I was supposed to do now. But I've seen bits and pieces of your process based off different videos you've done, and this isn't like a 15-minute, okay, my projections are done, let me just hit crunch and then upload my teams. I've seen you really sift through your teams. Now, obviously, you're building a ton. You're building tons and tons of different teams, but still, I've seen you, even in that process, you're not lazy and just like, okay, well, I built 500 teams. One of them's got to be a winner. You're literally going through these teams and deciding, and going back to the hand-built thing we were talking about, I think that's what you mean by hand-built team. You're choosing the teams you actually want in your pool. So you may have, say you have, I don't know, 1,500, or we'll keep the numbers a little bit small. Say you have 500 teams. It's not just 500 random fucking teams, right? It's 500 teams that you had supervision and elected to keep, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm never building just like 150 teams. I'm building like thousands, and then I'm like, which are the best 150? Doing that requires you to like take it to the next level and like develop an algorithm for like sifting through all these teams. But like if you're just trying to pick one team or 20 teams, then that is a lot more manageable than just trying to build 150 and like think about which ones are the best all by hand.
Bro, again, like, I don't think people understand, like, we say in life, anything, like, you want to be the best, you got to work hard. Like, anything, you got to work hard. And even in something like this, where, somebody's like, how hard? It's not hard. I can build a team in 15 minutes. Just download projections, put it in an optimizer, but that's why they're getting the results they're getting, because they're not taking those extra steps to kind of really take ownership of the teams they're putting out, and considering things like game theory into this, because the computer is not going to consider game theory for you, right? It's not going to do it for you. You're not going to. Maybe one day we'll have a feature where you can say, like, like, you'll see this. And some optimizers are working in ownership, which is cool, but it still takes the human element to, like you said, to have it make sense. When I first got into the industry, the way that I would always explain things to people, And I got away from it a little bit because people were taking me a little too literal, but a little too literal. Yeah, that's right. But the lineup's telling a story, like you said. There's got to be a narrative in there, man. Like, why did this guy hit the home run in the bottom of the ninth? Because this team took it to the bottom of the ninth, and they, whatever. I mean, baseball's probably the literal worst example I could have used. But I could have used any other sport, and that would have made more sense. But you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like the game script idea. Like in football, that's huge because one team, if they're up and they have the ball, like you're not going to get much action at the end of the game. But if both teams put up a lot of points and they're in the bottom of the fourth, like that's the most productive time. So thinking about how it's going to play out, that is important.
Yeah. Again, man, just kind of like, because like, I'm a big advocate, believer in like working hard for things, and again, I see so many people that just kind of look at, oh well, he just does it because he's like this, or he's just smart, so like they're gonna hear you have a math major and they're gonna assume that they can't be successful, and it's like maybe you're not gonna be successful the way that Alex is, or the way he approaches it's gonna, or the way you approach it is gonna be different from how Alex approaches it, but you can still find your niche, you can still find your way. You just have to be willing to work hard and actually go in. Like maybe you don't have to be a math major to look at some of the best players in the world every day and look at what they're doing, and trying to understand why. You don't have to be a math major for that, And I think a lot of times like players get caught up with excuses. And like one of my favorite expressions, man, I don't know, I must have said this on like 70% of my shows, but excuses are like assholes. Everyone's got one, and they all stink, right? It's one of my favorite ones in life, But I think that like that's something people miss out. They know you build tons of teams, but they don't understand the actual process. Like, okay, so Alex opens up Fantasy Cruncher, he clicks 1,000 teams, he clicks calculate, then he uploads them. It's not how it works, right? Like there's the hours. How long does it take you? Like, let alone the projections. Forget about the projections. That's a whole other thing, right? You still got to build your projections. From that point, how long does it take you from like, all right, it's time to build some teams? Up until
I think it's important. It's important to have like a really quick process in case there's like late information, something you can execute in like 5 minutes. Then you got like a medium process where you can like think about things a little bit more. And then you have like something like NFL where it's like you could build your lineups a day before and still like be pretty set. So it's all about kind of like figuring out a process that works for your schedule and trying to use that time as efficiently as possible.
Yeah. No, again, efficiency is big in everything. As far as like, so let's say a given NBA slate, right? You could spend all fucking day researching, you can spend all day building team, but until you have confirmation of who's playing and who's not, nothing means anything, right? The best player on the slate can change in 2 seconds, just one bit of news. So something like that happens, you have like 750 teams. There's a late scratch 5 minutes before lock. Like when that happens to me, we do our streams, and like we're obviously a much smaller company, so we do our streams, and like I am on our live stream up until lock. So I'm taking our members, and not just our members, anybody, whoever wants to hang out. I take them up until lock. I got my own fucking teams to build. I got my own 200 something whatever teams I'm doing. So I get that news. I'm telling them because my priority is, once we decide that we're in the content industry, our priority becomes the content and becoming to make sure our product is as good, and our people that are supporting us are getting everything out of it that they possibly can. So I'm telling everybody else, this is happening. I'm changing the projections on the site while I'm live on a show. Next thing I know, I now have 30 seconds to get this last crunch up. It's like, holy shit. So, and that's with like, a fraction of the amount of teams that you're going into on a given night. In one slate where you're in like 3 or 4 different, like, is that not like, I mean, you got to be used to it by now, but what's that process like for you?
Yeah, I think everyone is on an equal playing field because we all get the news at the same time. So it's kind of like accepting the fact that you're not going to be able to make the perfect lineups tonight. You got to just do your best in the limited time. So a lot of times in that instance, I'll like have less game theory. I'll just try to like have lineups that don't suck, So just take my chances with what I got. So you can't do it perfect every single night.
Oh, that's a very human-like response of you. I think most people were expecting you to say, "Well, I have this algorithm that prevents me from," you know what I mean? I think people were I'm sure people were expecting that. But again, that's the reality of the situation, is that people are dealing with the same. I had a buddy of mine who always used to tell me he thought FanDuel was easier, and I'm like, well, the FanDuel's like, why is it easier? Oh, it's easier to build teams. I don't have to make as many hard decisions, right? Like I can only use a shooting guard in the shooting guard slot. I don't have to worry about playing him also in the forwards. And I was like, I understand that, but if you feel that that's an edge for you, isn't that the same edge for everybody else? Like, if it's easy for you to build teams, isn't it easy for every fucking buddy else to build teams? Like, is it really harder? Like, you know what I mean?
It's funny because yeah, that's a great point. It's like DFS is a zero sum game where it's like if something's benefiting you, it's hurting someone else. So it's like one of the sports that I don't love doing is golf showdown because I feel like so random. But that's really good for a casual player that's just like picking random dudes. So it's like the shoe's always on like one person's foot. Like what's good for someone's going to be bad for someone else, and vice versa.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. And there's a lot of people that have like no matter, I don't know what it is. Like I've seen people that can't win a main slate for the life of them, but they fucking own the showdown slates. There's something about the showdown slates. They just own it. They just understand it. It just makes sense to them. The whole, it's wild. What would you say is your favorite DFS sport to play? From I guess we'll do, maybe it's the same, but from a business perspective, as far as you actually making your money, and from a like an enjoyment perspective, maybe it's the same.
Yeah, I love all of them so much. It's hard to pick, but NBA is probably the most exciting just because you got those last minute changes. I don't love the late swap element of it because I'd rather just like get on with my life after a lock. But my favorite for fantasy is probably baseball because there's so much strategy that goes into it. It's like every single player in the player pool is in play on any night. Like anyone can hit that homer, and that makes the strategy pretty interesting.
No, dude, it's wild, right? Like baseball, because like a home run is worth so much. Like a fantasy point to get like you get a base hit, it's three fantasy points, and that's it. And like if you're lucky, your player's gonna get 4 at bats tonight. That's like, you know what I'm saying? And so like to get a home run is massive, and like it's amazing how like they're at the bottom of the ninth, like it's one more out and the slate is over, and then one home run could change everything for you, right? You can go from like 50th place to second or first like that. It is exciting, and I wish that more people would be interested. Maybe they will be now that we haven't had sports, but like from a business perspective, I'm sure you've seen it too, the swings in popularity. It's clear that NFL and NBA are superior, like not even close as far as interest level, right? There's not as much of a demand in baseball. Why do you think that is? Is it because of the variance, or is it because the sport itself is just boring? To most, not to me. I love baseball, but to most.
I think MLB does have an advantage in that it takes place during a slow period for sports in the calendar. So the prize pools are decent in MLB, not as big as NBA as you mentioned, but I think it's just the fans of baseball tend to be older, less internet kind of oriented. So I think that's going to hold it back. Although I do know a lot of people in that demographic that do play daily fantasy and have a lot of fun with it. I think that the fans just aren't great matches for DFS.
Yeah, I get it, right? Baseball does seem a little more of a traditionalist type of, right? There's a certain appeal, like people that really like baseball, like the kind of person that you hear like they're watching a game at home and still keeping score in their book, right? Like that's a fan,
Yeah.
like that's a different type of fan from the asshole that's pounding beers at the football game in the parking lot. It's just a different type, right? That's just not even the same ballpark, right? Like. That makes sense. You're obviously a sports fan. What are some of your favorite sports teams out there? You're from the Chicago area, right?
I'm from Michigan, so I got the Pistons are probably my number one, just because I was growing up right when they won that championship in 04. So that was kind of what like got me into sports in a different way. But since I moved to Chicago, my new favorite team locally is the Chicago Sky, the WNBA team.
Oh shit!
It's like it's like I couldn't really like make any of the Chicago teams my number one unless there wasn't like a Michigan team. So there's no Detroit WNBA team anymore. So I was like, let's go. I'm a Sky fan.
I love it, man. They finding a way to please the Detroit people, so they don't call you a traitor, right? You can't have them call, because they always tell you you can't forget where you came from. So you can't have the people in the Michigan. Nah, man, he's changed, man. He's different. He's not the same. He's a Chicago guy now. But at the same time, you got to show some love to Chicago, your new home. You got to show some love. So you find a way to make it work, man. I like problem solving. Putting that math degree to use.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and the team that I have an eye on is the Chicago Huntsmen. Apparently, there's this new Call of Duty league this year where they have these regional teams. So I'm like, let's go. They play at the same arena as the Chicago Sky. So I'm like, I can just spend every day there instead of like once a week.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, listen, man, I could probably sit here and talk to you all day about questions. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure at some point down the road, I'll try to have you back and see if I can get some questions lined up for you. But I know it's also a busy time, man. We got KBO going on, and it's still relatively new. And I'm sure we both got to prepare for the next slate and all the other degenerate type stuff that the people call us degenerate for because we pick it up and have interest. But this was a lot of fun, man. We'll definitely, hopefully, we can do this again at some point and just kind of touch base, see where we're at. But like I said, I'm having a great time just meeting people in the industry and talking. And obviously, like I said, one of the biggest things when I brought you on, when I bring people on, I try to I want people to understand like the people that come on, and like it's not like I know you, it's just my first time talking to you. But one thing for sure is I guess the biggest takeaway is I've seen people look at you and they act like you don't work hard. And that's been like the biggest like misconception, I think, because I want people to be successful too. I want people to be able to look at our content, even if I never reach the goals that I want. If I can help other people reach their goals, then fine, man. Like it's all about the love of the industry, the love of the sport, the game, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the biggest things is I think people think if I can just figure out how to look at things differently, I don't have to work as hard. But the hard work never goes away, no matter what level you're at. If it does, then it'll show in your work and you'll start to drop down the rankings. We've seen a ton of people have a lot of success back in the early days of DFS because there wasn't a lot of competition. And then now, obviously, I would think you would know better than anybody else. The field is getting sharper every year. There's more and more people coming out, putting out content. People like you and I. We both have companies where we're giving people content and genuinely trying to help them. So the field is a little sharper, and they have more tools they're using. There's more people doing MME every single day, and there's still edges and whatnot, but it's by the day it's shrinking. The field is getting more educated, and with that, like anyone else, you got to adapt, right? You have to look at your strategy. Even being the number one player in the world, if you want to stay that way, you got to work for it. So that was one of the biggest things, man. I can imagine how hard you work. I know all your guys do, the staff and everybody, and I think people they hear the story and they hear like, oh, Awesemo, he just builds 1,000 teams, and they talk about it as if it's easy, as if it doesn't take work. So that was a big thing for me, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I think you make some great points about how the industry is getting smarter. Like we've seen this with poker, where like it evolved in a way like where they realized that they had to have winning players for the whole system to be sustained. So I think there'll always be opportunity to kind of like stay on top of the field and outsmart people and make some good money playing. So that's my hope, and I hope that the field will remain fertile for a long time.
Absolutely, man. Any closing thoughts out there for those who took the time to listen or watch Alex Baker, aka Awesemo?
Yeah, CK, great to talk to you. It's good luck to everybody out there in the DFS contests, and look forward to playing with everyone.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, man, can't thank you enough for coming on here. I've had a great time. I've got Kevin Roth, and we've had Winning 247, The Siege. We've had some really cool Blender, Jordan Kuba, some really cool guys, and we're looking forward to doing this. Even when sports come back, I still want to do this because, like I said, man, it's given me a great opportunity to meet some really, really cool people in the industry, shoot the shit. And again, I think it's something that could really help, man. Like understanding where a person comes from or how they think gives you an idea. Like maybe now when people look at your teams, maybe it'll make a little more sense to them now. Maybe if somebody watches this or listens to you talk and they see a lineup of yours that tells a story, maybe they understand why Awesemo picked that lineup, and maybe it'll help, or maybe not. Or maybe everybody will stay fish. Either way, the world goes on. Right. So, with that said, for Awesemo, for myself, the entire Wise Take Nation, as always, good luck.